So hey, good morning, APUSHers. Purpose of this video is to take a look at topic 7.13. This is the military development of World War II. There's three separate videos on this topic because there's a lot of detail that kind of comes into this, but we're going to try to focus on some of the big pictures as well. Big picture on 13A is going to be the American view of World War II, as well as a little bit of the development of military mobilization, trying to get people involved into the war effort. Here we go. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the American view of the war shifted dramatically. It went from being a public debate over the involvement of the United States in the war to seeing the war as a fight for the survival of freedom and democracy in the face of fascist and militaristic aggression. In order to fight this, there is an awareness that you're going to have a level of American response to this aggression. And this is going to happen both as a literal military and naval response. It's going to happen in terms of a response to Americans on the home front. It's going to be seen as a response to how Americans are going to think about these other parts of the world. This is also represents, I mean, even though there's like a really stark change that happens in here, I think that there's a way to connect this back to that, tried and true idea of the city upon a hill, that freedom and democracy really do represent the right way to do things. But maybe this is a little bit of a different mindset than what we've seen when we've brought up city upon a hill at different points in throughout the course. Here, it's not a way simply as promoting an American set of ideals, but it is promoting an American set of ideals in the face of oppression, in the face of attack, and in the face of fascist, racist ideology. And this is going to go a long way to changing how Americans are going to view this city upon a hill once we get out of World War II in the later part of the 1940s. This perspective of a fight of freedom versus fascism is going to be reinforced by the atrocities that are committed by the Japanese military through the invasion of Japan. The rape and murder of women and children in those attacks are really amplified. I mean, news stories about these are revealed to the American public throughout the course of the war, which gives greater, I guess, influence and inspiration towards the American war effort being purely justified to fight for freedom and democracy. And this is even more so reinforced by the revelation of the concentration camps and the Holocaust and the murder of 6 million Jews and another 6 million undesirables under the umbrella of Nazi ideology. There are plenty of wartime atrocities to be had, and the war is going to change the mindset of people as they are fighting through this. But the revelations that these are a matter of policy coming from fascist and militaristic governments in the Axis powers, this is going to fuel the American desire to fight this fight, and to everybody, almost a unanimous pull to do your part towards this war effort. Ultimately, the U.S. and the Allies are going to be victorious for a few different reasons, spelled out here by the College Board for us, right? So, first off, they kind of point out the idea of Allied cooperation, that this is not just a pure United States victory in this. It is the United States working in conjunction with the British and the French, and with the Soviet Union, and with China as they are continuing to fight against Japanese aggression in Asia. This is a war that if the United States was left on its own to fight this, it would have been a real struggle. But the idea this is a global cooperative effort is going to change that American viewpoint about interventionism in the world in the post-World War II years. There's also going to be huge scientific and technological advances through World War II, the atomic bomb being the most notable of which, but communications technology and radar technology are all going to get huge advancements during World War II, and this is something that's going to give the Allies an advantage in some ways over what the Axis powers had. And this is also going to be seen through the contributions of servicemen and women. It's really easy to get caught up and talk about like the generals and the presidents and the central decision makers, but we have to make sure we are remembering the millions of Americans that were sacrificing everything to go participate in this military effort on the front lines, and also making other sacrifices that we tend to take for granted these days by Americans that were staying on the home front. So we need to make sure we're taking a little bit more of a closer look on this element of a cause for the Allied victory. Topic 712 is going to get into the changes economically and socially that are going on the American home front. Here, we need to look a little bit more about the military mobilization that goes on and the efforts that Americans are making to serve in the military in different capacities. In 1940, the United States actually passes a conscription act. Selective Service and Training Act of 1940 is a draft, and this is a draft law that is passed a year and a half before Pearl Harbor. So there are millions of American men that are signing up and serving in the military, compulsory military service, even before, well before the United States enters the war, while the debate on the war is still going on. Fairly controversial in 1940 when this comes out. But once Pearl Harbor happens, there is a very high enlistment rate for American servicemen. 6 million Americans are going to choose to enlist and are going to enter military service even without being drafted. So a couple of examples of this that we can kind of see just as we're walking through this aspect of the war. In April 1941, there are a group of American pilots that volunteer to go fight in support of China as they are fighting against the resistance of the Japanese invasion. So the Flying Tigers, these are all volunteer servicemen that are going to fly combat missions and complete training missions for the birth of the Chinese Air Force. And this is something that is purely on a voluntary basis, and this is going on 7-8 months before Pearl Harbor. So this is again showing that there is a real debate on both sides of entering the war prior to December 1941. College Board points out to us, and rightfully so, that there are efforts that are being made by not just the traditional elites in American society. It's not just a white male dominance that's going through this, that there are women and minorities that are actively participating on a voluntary effort on this, both on the home front, but here again we're focused on like the military activity. So for women in service, the women Air Force service pilots and the women's Army Corps, their primary function was to offer military support, not really fighting on combat lines, but military support so far as military communication, intelligence and coding. The Army Corps and the Air Force service pilots, they were ferrying aircraft from production facility to airbase along the coast of the United States so they could be transported overseas. And by 1943, women pilots are flying larger planes overseas so they can be put into active military duty. And so this is something that is oftentimes overlooked, but it's an important element of this unified front coming from the United States. The Navajo Code Talkers are going to be instrumental in military operations in the war in the Pacific, as they are going to have the unbreakable code that Japanese intelligence could not decipher the code code that was being used to relay military orders, and they couldn't decipher it because there was no background that they had at all about the Navajo language. And so this is a sign. Maybe it's a sign of some of the past history of Native Americans in the United States, but this is also a sign of sort of the diversity lending a hand towards the, well, ultimate victory for the United States. The same can be said for the 442nd Infantry Regiment. They are notable as the most highly decorated military unit in United States history, which is doubly notable because they are almost completely made up in World War II. The whole regiment consists of second generation Japanese Americans. At the same point in time that Japanese Americans are being sent to internment camps for fear of their loyalty to the United States, that they might act as saboteurs for the Japanese government, young Japanese American men not only enlist, but they serve in the military in Europe and show high signs of valor and military decoration. The same can be said for African American soldiers, most notably with the Tuskegee Airmen that are flying combat missions across Italy in the European theater of war. This also holds true for men like Vernon J. Baker, who wins the Congressional Medal of Honor in 1997 for his military service and for heroism in the field of battle in Italy in 1943. The efforts made by the diverse populations of Americans, women, Native Americans, African Americans, Japanese Americans, this shows a strength in the diversity of the United States. The fact that Vernon Baker is not going to be awarded the Medal of Honor until 1997 is a sign that there are still issues to come for the United States in recognizing this diversity that the country holds and the strength that it can represent. After World War II, there was an informal policy that was instituted that soldiers of color just weren't under consideration for this type of military honor. But by the 1990s, during the Clinton administration, that policy was exposed and changed. So definitely after World War II, there's going to be a real shift in American society towards embracing the diversity of the country that's really not seen at any point before this. But here during the war, it's important for us to focus at this point in the war in the strength that the diversity of Americans kind of contributes toward the entire war effort.